Our job begins where most advisors stop. Saving money is great, but how do you spend it without risk in retirement? Welcome to Every Day is Saturday with Brad Gatto and Matt Stahl, partners and private wealth managers at Fiat Wealth Management. In this podcast, we aim to broaden your knowledge about the financial world we live in today and make the boring and complex financial decisions fun, informative, and educational. Join us on this journey where Brad and Matt will explore different strategies on how to spend your money without guilt and have peace of mind knowing you are spending it the optimal way in retirement.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl, partner at Fiat Wealth Management, along with my partner, Brad Gatto.
Did you just about forget who you were?
I did for a split second. I'm really nervous.
This is going to be fun.
Brad's putting me on the spot today, everybody. So I have no idea what he's going to ask me, and he has some questions prepared before we dig into that.
I'm going to come up with them.
I'm going to come up with them. What have you been up to?
Well, some of what I've been up to, we're going to talk about today. So I don't want to spill the beans there. Everybody knows that, at least I think they do. We are standing up our own registered investment advisory firm. And so we've got that going on. So that's work stuff.
You can listen to our podcast episode about that.
Yes, you can. More importantly, I have a haircut today, and that's always my favorite day every 3 weeks. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you're like, gosh, his hair looks a little long. Not for long. About 2 hours from now, I get my haircut. And I'm one of those people that I'm religious about it. It's every 3 weeks.
It's kind of,
yeah.
I have those things too. It's just not haircuts.
It's just not haircuts. Well, what is yours?
Meditating.
Okay.
Sitting in the park.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I like haircuts. How are you?
I'm good. I'm real good. As we just referenced, it's birthday season at our house. We got a lot going on. We collectively have 5 travel sports teams that our kids are on right now. 3 different travel soccer teams, 2 lacrosse teams. As you know, it adds up.
I wonder, and this comes from me growing up in rural. I don't know the right way to say that, the correct way to say that word.
Rural.
Yeah. We grew up in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. So did you.
So did I.
So I didn't know what lacrosse was.
I'm still figuring it out.
Growing up. And so when you say to the listeners of the podcast, you're in 2 traveling lacrosse teams, not you personally, your kids.
Mm-hmm.
What's your best 10-second
oh my gosh
explanation of what lacrosse is?
It's bizarre. It's a combination between basketball, hockey, and soccer. That's how I describe it.
And hockey is a combination of boxing, figure skating, and
it is physical. Lacrosse is physical. It is. I was blown away by the amount of things they can do.
Yeah, it's really popular up here.
Yes,
fun to watch. Being Minnesota, because we're from rural Iowa.
Rural. I'm pretty certain we don't have lacrosse in Iowa still.
I don't think so.
Not in the school setting.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. But when we were growing up, we also didn't have hockey.
Right.
And now there's starting to become club hockey teams and things like that.
Really?
Yeah. I'm really bad at is stepmom?
Yeah.
Her.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I hope they don't listen to this episode. I was going to say mother-in-law, and that's not right.
That is not right.
That's not right. That's Cindy. If you're listening to this, I know who you are. My stepmom, her grandson is in hockey, and he's traveling all over the place, and they live in the Des Moines area. So okay. I know that it's picking up down there, but
that's the big city though. That's the metro.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not saying it's in rural Iowa, but I couldn't even spell hockey growing up.
Yeah.
In Iowa, they spell hockey wrestling.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I really wanted hockey gloves growing up.
Why?
I really wanted to play hockey only because I wanted the gloves because I thought they looked like Transformer hands.
Oh, okay.
Never happened.
Yeah. Well, I've had a hockey stick in my hand, I think twice in my entire life.
Probably 5 times.
I've kind of derailed us, but I've been trying to let you just take a breath, settle down just a little bit. Again, if you watch this online, you're going to notice that we're also dressed up today.
We are.
Because we also had an inner circle workshop today. So just a lot of stuff. But that said, today's episode is all about what Matt Stahl wants to be when he grows up. If you have not heard yet, there is an organizational change, ownership change here at Fiat. And so I want to give a little bit of backstory for those of you that do not know. Fiat is on the cusp of turning 13 years old. And by the time this airs, this episode airs, we will be 13 years old. Yep. And the story is that we started Fiat in 2009, and in 2000, about, 18 months, 24 months later, I sold my shares of Fiat to you. And I went off gallivanting. I stayed in this industry, but I went to the other side of the industry. Yep. And instead of being an advisor directly to clients, I was a wholesaler to advisors. So my clients were advisors, I wasn't an advisor for that period of time. And you stayed and ran Fiat all by yourself. Yep. Carried the torch, the baton, whatever you want to call it. It was you and basically one part-time assistant, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So for 9 years.
9 years.
And then we stayed in contact that whole time, still friends. In fact, I was learning a lot about the industry by working with other advisors. And so we kind of had a fun relationship where I was kind of feeding back to you things I was learning and from other advisors in the industry in general. And then we started lightly chatting about getting back into business together again. In 2017, it became a little more serious in 2018 and then formalized in 2019.
Yep.
Actually, May 31st of 2019, I won't forget it because it's my birthday. We drove to rural North Dakota to finalize paperwork for me to purchase back the shares of Fiat I had sold to you 9 years earlier.
Yep.
So then what I like to tell people is I remarried the same guy twice. Business relationship, right? So became 50-50 owners of Fiat back in May 31st of 2019. And here we are almost exactly 3 years to the date. And you're stepping away as an owner of Fiat and I'm buying your shares from you as you bought my shares from me.
Yep.
Would it be 12 years ago now? 12 years ago?
12 years
11,
ago.
Something like that?
Yep.
So to recap, both owned it. Then you just owned it. Then both owned it. Now I just own it.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Complete sense. So yeah, passing the torch.
Yeah. So to make all that very short, I'm buying, we're changing ownership. I'm going to be 100% owner of Fiat Wealth Management. But what's important for people to know is, Matt, does that mean that one, you don't like me? And so you're leaving me? I mean, why do you want to sell your shares of Fiat right now?
Yeah. Well, as you're well aware, this has been an evolving conversation we've been having for months. So it really didn't start there. It didn't start with, this is how things are going to end up.
Sure. As
you're well aware of, and hopefully most of you are, self-awareness and just personal development, something that's really important to me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's been a lot of breakthroughs in the last 5 years. So just to recap, I think, can I take it one step beyond that? Why did we partner up in the first place again?
Yes. Yes, you can.
So, going from 2010 up to 2019, really 17, when we first started having those conversations, it was very much felt like a struggle. So it was, I have the weight of this on my shoulders. I have to make this work. And I learned a lot about myself during that time frame.
Yep.
And what the mindset was in approaching all of that. When we first started talking in 2017, I found that I had figured out, or I thought I had figured out a way to deliver an experience to clients that they enjoyed, and at the same time be extremely efficient when it comes to a business operating standpoint. I also found that I had this yearning to build something bigger. And in our conversations, as we had continued to talk through that, I knew that we had complementary skill sets that we could do that. So that's in the first place, it was, I had this desire buried that started to come up, that I knew that we could build something big, that we could impact a lot of people. Mm. And that's why we joined forces in 2019 in the first place.
Yep.
And so as we've continued to go through this, I've continued to dive further into personal work. And Courtney, as she actually did a podcast in the Enneagram, a lot of the self-awareness stuff is just understanding what are your values and what gets you up in the morning. As part of all this, I came to the conclusion of creating a personal mission statement. And that was to inspire people to chase their dreams and see every day as an opportunity to do that. And as I continue to kind of wrestle with that and think through it, I started to realize like, I don't know that I'm fulfilling that particular role. And so your question, you have actually inspired me, and, watching you figure out this is like your dream. And that makes me want to figure out what mine is. So like, we've had this conversation so many times, but it's like, hey, I sincerely believe you're born to do this. You love it. You're amazing. And as we look at that, I ended up in a position where I was like, I don't know if I should be playing the role that I'm playing right now. That's how we started this conversation.
Yeah.
So really a lot of this was just the inspiration piece. And as you know this, because we had this conversation, I brought that up late last year.
Yep.
Where I said, hey, I'm very much have the entrepreneur spirit. And a lot of people like to say this because it's the cool thing to do. And as you and I both know, there's still a lot of things that are not cool about being an entrepreneur. There's a lot of stuff that's not as fun.
Yeah.
Like we've both personally grown so much over the past 3 years through making mistakes, through learning. But as part of that, just realizing like I am an entrepreneur. I like to create stuff. I'm not very good at continuing to maintain that stuff. And so when we first started this conversation, I brought it up and just said, hey, look, I can tell that you're leaning into a lot of pieces of this, which is amazing. And I want to lean back a little bit on some things. I feel like I can have an impact. I feel like I can bring value. But when it comes to the actual presence, I could tell that you're leaning more into a lot of that. And I was standing still or wanting to lean back a little bit. And so our conversation started, and I just brought that up. Just said, hey, I don't want to, like, we've said this over and over again. We're really good friends outside of this business.
Yep.
So I want to ensure that we retain that first and foremost. And so as we started to have that conversation, I said, hey, I think we should probably figure out a way to address this. And of course, your response was, it's not an issue. Not going to be an issue. And so as that conversation continued to evolve, we did start to think about some different things. And me just digging and digging and digging deeper, what I really came to was, I know that I can provide value here. I know I can provide impact, but I know that you're going to be able to provide measurably more than that just through the role that you have taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to take this kind of hippie. So bear with me.
That surprises me. Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in you can only receive what you can give. And from a universal or a faith-based perspective and looking at that, then I just would not feel okay if I felt that you were contributing way more value and I was receiving just the same amount. And that's where this conversation really started to go. And it has been I think it's been amazing. The two of us kind of putting our heads together and going through all this, figuring out what's best for the company, how we can retain our friendship, and how I can continue to contribute, provide value. And so that's how we landed here. That was a really long answer.
That's fine, because when people listen to podcasts, they have the ability to 1.25 times it, 1.5 times it. Like they can. No, but in all seriousness, don't fast forward it. There's a couple things in there, Matt, in that, explanation of how, one, we got to the decision that we did, but two, how you individually, through a lot of self-development, got to where you're at, that I just want to point out. And the first thing, and I think the most important thing, is that the people, the families of Fiat that we serve know, and we'll talk about this in a second, but one, you're not going away. You're not gone. But more importantly than that, even the decision of stepping away from the ownership side of the business, in our conversations were really centered around this idea of how do we put Fiat first, which ultimately by connection means how do we put our clients first? And then how do we maintain our friendship? because through the ebbs and flows of our ownership of Fiat and the story that I told earlier, and the fact that I sold to you, I bought back from you, you sold to me. This is our third transaction. And through all three transactions, we've actually used the same lawyer.
Yep.
And so
he thinks we're crazy.
He thinks we're absolutely crazy because one, he like insisted in the first transaction 12 years ago or however long ago it was, that we each have our own lawyer so that those two lawyers could argue over how the sale was going to go and who got, how much you were paying for those shares and all that other kind of stuff. We're like, no. We got this all figured out. We just need the legal paperwork to make it happen. And so then when we came back to him 3 years ago and said, okay, guess what? I'm back. I think he thought we were a little bit nuts. And then, so then when we called him this time, we're like, hey, we're doing this again. He was like, okay, whatever, guys. I get it. We're in his Rolodex now permanently. But through all of those transactions, there's never been any animosity. There's never been any argument over, what's fair or anything like that. I just don't know that anybody would ever believe our conversations unless they sat in on them, because it's always been around, you and I looking out for Fiat as a company, because it's not even just our clients anymore. Now that Fiat has 13 team members, it's about them as well, right? Because not only do we have a responsibility to the families that we serve, but we have a responsibility. I mean, these people have jobs, like they rely on this job at Fiat for their families and their livelihood. And there's a lot of weight that goes into that. And so in our conversations, putting that first, and I would argue that was driven by you, like that you've always been centered around this idea of what's best for the company, what's best long-term, what does that look like? And so that's vitally important. And then the second piece of that is your level of self-discovery, internal work, and just being focused on your values. We talk about it a lot at Fiat, and it's easier to talk about than it is to do, right? We tell our families, like, let your values guide your money. Don't let your money guide your values. We talk a lot about behavior and things of that nature. Much easier to talk about than it is to live.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea of pouring into yourself and making sure that when you look back on your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 or 40 years from now, that you can say honestly that your values guided your decisions. Because I would argue that this decision for you to step back from the ownership perspective of Fiat is not a smart financial decision.
Probably not. No. I've said that several times.
Yeah, it's not. And in fact, when I remember the first time I talked to my wife about this, and I was like, well, this is the conversation we're having. And Matt, Matt wants to step away from the ownership side. And so I think it's going to end up in that I'm buying him out of his 50% of the business. She goes, well, what's wrong with the business? Like, are you guys, is the business bad? Is like, because it seems like a financial decision.
Yeah.
And it just isn't. And even in these conversations that we've had recently about what does that look like? Because of course there has to be some sort of transaction there. There has to be paperwork and all this other sort of stuff. But our conversations have been centered around not just, again, the Fiat family, but each other, and making sure that you feel good about it, that I feel good about it. And that ultimately, again, that whatever deal was struck was good for the overall health of the firm and for your family and for my family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But again, I just want to give you credit because I think you drive that. And when you look at our path together here and why Fiat is what it is because we are so different. So different. I don't think we could be more different.
I think we share some weaknesses.
Probably. Well, that's just because there are a lot of weaknesses. And so it's like a Venn diagram. There's going to be some sort of like overlap there. That makes sense. And I'm obviously being a little bit facetious to make a point and for a little bit of humor here, but it's worked out really, really well. And so this new season of where Fiat is going, there's always fear as an entrepreneur. And I think a certain level of fear is healthy because it drives you to stay motivated and all these sorts of things. But I think both of us are genuinely excited for what this means for you and what this means for me and then for Fiat next month, next year.
Absolutely. That is, when I think about this decision, the areas where I think I can bring value, which we've talked about, is culture. So building the culture within here, helping people to look outside of just the day-to-day of what we're doing.
Yep.
So it's thinking about why are we doing these things and how are we doing them? And what's our energy? What kind of energy are we bringing to that?
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about having the space to bring more of those resources to the team here.
Yeah.
And one thing we did talk about is from a self-awareness standpoint, I am not a details person. I've said this so many times. You don't say. So I've been put in that box, being an engineer, and Brad as well. I always say Brad knows me as well as I know myself, and probably a lot of other people, because he sees all the faults and all the strengths. But from that standpoint, there's an element of all of this that I enjoy a lot, and it's the people part of it.
Yep.
It's the decision making side. It's the coaching side. That's why I plan to stay engaged on the client side to some degree, and also internally here. So
let's put a line in there, and let me ask the question so you can give an explicit answer. So, not going to be in the ownership structure of Fiat anymore, but you are still going to be at Fiat. So, what does that look like? What is Matt Stahl's new role at Fiat Wealth Management?
Yeah, the two big things I see. So we have thrown around all these fancy terms. So we've talked about Chief Mentoring Officer as a title. I still plan to stay engaged with the leadership team, with the advisors themselves. I plan to stay involved in some client work with some help from other people, and then acting as an advisor to you, frankly. So I get to be a third party where I don't have a conflict of interest. I know enough about the business to be able to objectively help you look at stuff we just did a workshop on bias. So to take some of those biases and put them aside and help look at everything from an objective standpoint.
So if I could have you repeat, because I want to give my version of what you just said.
Yeah.
Because mine's better. Repeat for everybody what your mission statement is.
Yes. To inspire others to chase their dreams and see every day as an opportunity to do so.
So in that, living out that mission statement here at Fiat, the way that I would summarize what you said is that you're going to continue to be kind of a coach and mentor to Fiat at multiple levels, at the advisor level, and continue to work with the advisors here at Fiat in that capacity. And I would argue more importantly to myself. Mm-hmm. And because you and I don't know that everybody, I don't know why they would know this. You and I spend a decent amount of time away from the business, working on the business. Like we physically leave the office and spend a day, sometimes a whole weekend, working on the business and not in the business. And it's in those sessions, it always goes kind of the same way. I've got more of the practical mind, and I've got I'm the more the ideas. And then you're more of the sounding board and helping me think through the 17 other steps I didn't think through on that idea and the pros and cons of that. And also some of the emotional side of it, of how that impacts people emotionally and how that's going to affect culture at the firm or for the families that we serve or whatever it may be. And so living out your mission statement that you've created for yourself inside of Fiat means that you're going to continue to do a ton of coaching and mentoring, which you've already done. It just means giving up the day-to-day of the ownership side, which just doesn't check that box for you. And it's not something that you enjoy doing. It's not something that you love doing. And again, to have somebody make a decision that isn't a financial decision, because we see it all the time, right? People have jobs and they're like, well, I have to stay in this job. I hate my job. I hate what I do. I don't like getting up and going to work. I hate Monday. I always look forward to Friday, like that whole mentality, but it's a paycheck. I got to do it. And you could have looked at it that way with Fiat. And honestly, Matt, I think we probably would have been okay, like staying 50-50 owners of the firm for a long time. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it from a pure numbers perspective, it's probably what you should have done.
Right. Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that to you before all the paperwork is, the ink is dry, and I'm joking, obviously we've already talked about this, but it's a decision that is what's best for you long-term outside of just the financial aspect of it. And I actually think it's going to be really, really good for Fiat in the capacity of,
absolutely,
you already bring good work in those areas that we discussed to Fiat. And I think when relieved of the things that you don't love, it's just going to get even better in the areas that you're already providing value. So that's exciting to me. I don't know that I would have accepted your shares. It's not a resignation, but I don't know that I would have accepted this if I thought you weren't going to be around at all or in that capacity, because you're also a really, really big part of our culture here. And you've driven a lot of it. So it's going to be important for that to continue to be a thing. And the good news is it's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
But it's not a full-time position, quote unquote.
No.
The expectation is you're not here in the office 40 hours a week and that kind of deal. So that said, Matt, the next question is, what in the world are you going to do with the rest of your time?
That's a great question. what I want to do is create something that is my inspiration. What I mean by that is going back to the values.
Mhm.
So I know the values that are most important to me are wellness, adventure, connection, and pursuit. So wellness, as most of you probably are aware, I own a gym. That's a big part of my life.
Yep.
It's a big part of my family's life. So, but that also extends.
Big is an understatement.
So big is an understatement. I mean, people assume that that's just physical. For me, that's actually means mental as well.
Mhm.
So the mental health side of things, the adventure side, as you know, if I don't have a trip plan, if I don't get out snowboarding or mountain biking, like I get really antsy.
Yep.
And so it's important for me to spend time outside in nature doing something active, pushing the edge just a little bit. And that's something that makes me feel alive. Gets me into that flow state that we talk about. Connection is all the stuff we were talking about, the coaching, emotional side of everything, the soft skills piece. And then the pursuit side is like, we've texted this back and forth so many times. Like I would do this over again, like 100 times out of 100.
Yep.
Been an adventure. Like that's all pursuit. It's all building something. We've built something real in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool to see. So that pursuit thing is what wakes me up in the morning. And so I know that there's going to be some element of that. What that's going to look like, I have no idea. So I'm hoping to take the space to figure out what that is. And then not only that, bring that as a resource to us internally here as well.
Yeah.
So just so we can show up as better humans, which means that we're going to show up as better advisors to our families.
I love the answer, but I'm going to put the screws to you a little bit. Give me one specific practical thing. You have more time in your day now. What is one thing that you want to make sure you do more of that you're not currently doing? One like tangible.
You're not going to like this answer. I'm going to plant a garden.
Okay. Well, why would I not like the answer? Am I like an anti-garden guy?
No, that's not very concrete. That's like, and then what? Then what are you going to do with that?
Well, I would assume you're planting the garden to eat what comes out of the garden.
Yes. It is.
And you lost the co-op where you live.
Yeah. I just got razzed for bringing that up as an issue a couple of days ago. It's reopening. So
it is?
Yeah. That's something else.
That's exciting for you.
So
did you do it?
No, I did not. Imagine me running a grocery store. We ran out of cheese again.
Yeah.
I'd be terrible.
That's fair.
So from a concrete standpoint, I'm going to spend some time with my kids. It freaks me out that my oldest just turned 12.
Yeah.
And I look at pictures when they were 5 and 6. So that's the first thing, just for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to create the space to do all the soft skills stuff. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to pray. I'm going to think through what this all looks like.
Yeah.
And try to create a concept, bounce it off you and see what you think.
All right. No pressure.
No pressure.
Matt, I'm excited for Fiat, but I'm also excited for you. It's an inspiration. I just want you to know that it's an inspiration to me to watch somebody chase their values the way that you do. And I think for anybody listening to this podcast, it should be for you as well. And it should be maybe even a push or a nudge for those of you that aren't doing that don't feel fulfilled in their day to day and don't feel like, when they wake up in the morning that they're excited to go do whatever it is that they do. Life, it's the old proverbial life is too short, that whole deal. And so I didn't just encourage everybody to, it's an encouragement to me. You're an inspiration to me to do that with my life and my family as well. So
awesome. Thank you, man.
The last thing I wanted to add before we kind of close is, one, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, if anybody listening has any questions for Matt or I, we're an open book on these sorts of things. We're more than happy to field any questions that you have. But I just want to end by saying this because it's popped in my head a couple of times as you were talking, and I just think it's important. So most people that know me really well know that I'm, my faith is important to me. That doesn't mean I'm a perfect person or that, it just means that I try and that I'm a Jesus guy that tries, although imperfectly. But one of the things that I love about that Jesus talks about in scripture is this analogy where God basically says, I'm the vine and you are the branches. And connected to me, you can do all things. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Once you get cut off from the vine, you're going to wither away and die. And so to be plugged into that vine, the analogy I like, a more simple analogy I like to use all the time is like a lamp. A lamp can't work if it's not plugged in. It doesn't matter how hard it tries. It has to be plugged into its power source to do anything. And that's kind of what Jesus is getting at in that analogy. But what's interesting about that in the analogy that he uses with vines and like grapevines is, if you were lucky enough to own a vineyard or to have grapevines, then you would know that in order for your vines to grow and to flourish, you actually have to cut them back. You have to prune them and you have to make them less so that they can become more. But a very scary proposition with anything in life, to go backwards, to go forwards. And it's also very scary to go back down a path that you've already walked 10 miles down. Right. Knowing that in order for you to make a different decision, you have to go all the way back to the T intersection 10 miles ago and then make a different decision. And so what happens in life a lot of times is we just don't. And we kind of stick with what we have. And so just another way to say, again, just an inspiration to see somebody that is willing to, one, prune, has enough self-awareness to do it. And ultimately, I think what we both believe, although we wouldn't be doing this, is it's not only going to, that pruning lead to better and more flourishment for you, for me, and for the people that work here at Fiat and the families that we serve here at Fiat.
Absolutely.
But man, it's scary.
It is. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Both of us have our fears around all of this, but both have some excitements as well. And I mean, I don't want to end by saying it's been a fun ride, man, or something like that, because it's not over. You're not going anywhere.
I plan to continue podcasting. So.
Yeah. This is another thing. This is another rhythm that you enjoy and that we enjoy doing together. And so you're going to continue to do this as well, the Inner Circle Workshop, things like that. But so again, you're not gone.
I'm not gone.
You didn't pass away or nothing like that. So, but it is a change. And so hopefully everybody that's listening now has a general understanding of what and why, and feel some inspiration.
Yeah. Awesome.
Now, you were nervous at the beginning of this.
I feel great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it off your chest.
I did. Yeah.
Now the world knows.
The world knows.
That one random listener we have in Africa knows. I don't know if that's true. I just made that up. All right. So as we close, guys, as always, thank you so much for listening to Every Day is Saturday. How cool is it? The name of our podcast is Every Day is Saturday, which is this whole mantra we're trying to build here to live your life in a way that is the case. And we're trying to practice what we preach.
Absolutely.
Right. So thanks for listening to this episode of Every Day is Saturday. I'm Brad Gatto here with my good friend and I don't know, mentor, Matt Stahl. I used to always say partner, but that's technically not, whatever. We'll figure that out. We'll have to figure that out.
That's why I stumbled in the beginning.
Anyway, thanks for joining us. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. If you don't know how to subscribe to a podcast and you just found this podcast, email us. Like my dad, he never knows how to share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. So Dad, I know you listen to every episode, so I'm calling you on the carpet, but I would assume you're not the only one that doesn't know how to do that. So if you don't, and you want to be notified of these episodes, then we'll teach you how to subscribe, share with your friends and family. We would love it if you did it. Thanks so much for listening. And we will see you all next Saturday.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.